Yo, what's up everybody? How you doing? This is your coach Renz, and today I want to expound on the subject matter from yesterday's live. Yesterday's live was concerning who are you? And we discussed in that live how you became who you are. From the moment of birth, you didn't decide who you were going to be. From the moment of birth, you were born into a family, you was born into a culture, you were born into a nation, you were born into a political party. You were born into a way of thinking and a way of living. So as I take my meditation this morning, a deeper thought came upon me in concerning some of the other attributes of what was discussed. As we move into our adolescent years and our teenage years, we begin to find justifications for why we think a certain way, why we live a certain way. Many of our experiences, we've been told how to experience them. And so we justify those experiences and how we've been told we should relate to them. Beyond that, our government, and I use calendars in the example, how calendars has affected us, how calendars have decided who we are, and how it's moved societies. Whether we count time by the sun or do we count time by the moon. Countries like China still utilizing a lunar calendar, giving an intercessory of 3 months every 3 to 4 years, usually every 3 years. That they have an 8-day week versus the 7-day week in the majority of the world. But 1/3 of the population lives on an 8-day week. That all these things have determined how we live. How religious practices are done has been based on what governments has decided, and some of those decisions were based on the calendar itself. So what I wanted to expound upon was something that after meditation yesterday and meditation this morning and the download I received in my dreams last night from the universe, from the Creator, is the thought process that a slight argument, a slight discussion occurred within yesterday's video. And in that I realized and I thought about the fact that many of us live in a Wag the Dog situation. Now for you, those of you who don't know the political term of Wag the Dog, the term means that the tail wags the dog, not the dog wagging the tail. So in other words, we could say that in the law of cause and effect, we know that for every effect there is a cause, meaning that there is a causal factor that creates the effect. But in a Wag the Dog mentality, we believe that the effect created the cause. We believe that in order to know the end, in order to know the beginning, we must first know the end. That we focus on the end and not the beginning. Or in our world, we focus on the here and now and utilize what one teacher used to call historism to determine what the past was. A gentleman was very irritated by me in the fact that I discussed the fact that the original calendars of all known situations that we have, of known culture, civilizations that we have record of, utilize either a 10-day or an 8-day calendar. That the first 7-day calendar known to man did not come from his current religious book, but came from the Babylonians and the Persians. Well, it came from the Babylonian and was adapted later by the Persians when they conquered Babylon in 550. It went against his sensibilities of today. And in so, he is wagging the dog. He is looking for the effect to have created the cause. Because of his belief today, he is trying to determine the past. Why is that relevant? Where is there meaning in that? Before I went to sleep last night in my meditation, I asked the question, why is it so important for people to force the past to fit their present? Why do we wag the dog? What is it that we're looking for? And I came to realize in my dreams, from the download of my dreams, that it is truly because we have a great desire, a need for the past to justify our present. We desire this so greatly that we will ignore facts. We desire this so greatly that we will ignore what is helpful and beneficial to us today that will allow us to have a different future. I have known many men and women who engage in relationships, and because of the trauma that they experienced in the past, which has made them into who they are today, they expect and desire for whomever they come across, whomever they decide to call their mate, to conform themselves to their today. That the part of them that is today should be acceptable, and that today is who the person should love, who the person should deal with, who the person should conform to, even if it goes against that person's deal breakers. That you should conform because of the past, that who they are today should be who you should accept. When in truth, when it comes to something of that nature, when it comes to trauma, we have to go back to the beginning. We have to go and not just look at the past to understand it, but look at the past to remedy our present. Look at the past to change our present to fit what our desires and our goals are. In this situation of a relationship, if a person has experienced something as traumatic as sexual molestation, which we know is very prevalent in our world, if someone has experienced that, most will expect you to go to their past, see the sexual trauma that they experience, allow that to be the justification for them to remain how they are right now, and for you to accept that as being who they are right now, and it should not change, as if who they are right now created their past, instead of going to the beginning in order to understand the end, because the person is still in the middle. Go to their beginning. This happened to you. This is a tragic thing. It's a horrible thing. It should have never happened to you. Whether you were not protected by an adult or someone was evil and their desires and wants negated your ability to live in happiness and bliss. Whether that happened, how that happened, we go to it so that we can work through it to get you into a state as if it had not happened, so that you can enjoy, so that you can be present, so that you can revel and gain the connection that occurs through the act of intimacy. You see, the act of intimacy is partially designed, is designed for reproduction, yes, but it is also designed to create bonds, to create connection between two people. But if someone or something happened that disturbed that tore that away, it is not that we say that that is no longer the case for this activity of intimacy, and we must just accept it as it is, the tail wagging the dog, the middle, and in this case the middle justifying the beginning. But no, we go to the beginning so that we can get you into a state of mindset, a state of being of before it happened, so that you can now move into what your end game should be, which is to be able to utilize it for its purposes, to understand it for its purposes. In the case of the gentleman that I spoke to briefly in my podcast yesterday, because of how we live today, because of how our culture is today, we cannot make the past fit it if the past have something that would alter how we conceive it, therefore altering how we move and how we live. We go back to that past. We go beyond that past. We go and understand that past. We understand not only what we look at today, but understand the culture of that time frame. Understand what happened beforehand. Take in all information. You see, we, after the age of about 13, we only want to take in information that justifies our current mode of thinking. But the true mark of an ascended person is to be able to realize how much you do not know. Is to be able to say that I am existing without a predetermined landing spot. That just because someone else's opinions of how things should be, how things are, how things will be, does not mean that that is truth and accurate. But that if there is additional information, if there are things that I didn't previously know, that I will openly take them into account. If there were societal traditions that were unknown to me in the past and now they become known, do I scoff at them because they go against what my current is? Or do I open my mind to say, new revelations, new way of thinking, new concepts of being? Do I take those into account? Many are afraid to do that because they feel that it would destroy all that they are. It would go against many other people. They will feel so much pain. Many are afraid to do the work because if they did the work, then they may lose family members. They may lose friends. They may lose their standing in society. People may shun them. They may shun their business. They may not like them or love them as they have before. And many people, most people, are afraid of losing love. So they stand where they are. They will justify it regardless of what has been presented to them. So we cannot wag the dog. If you want to find the end, you must first go to where the beginning is. You cannot pour water on the outside of the cup and expect to drink the water. It must be poured inside the cup if you expect to drink the water. To pour it outside the water is to let it free flowing. And you may conceptually in your mind think that you're drinking the water, but in truth, you will remain parched. You must pour the water into the cup. Utilize the cup for its purpose. Your mind is for thinking. Your mind is for projecting. Your mind is for absorbing. But if you are only willing to absorb, you're only willing to accept what is already in the cup, then you cannot grow, you cannot develop, you cannot ascend, you cannot become the greatest versions of yourself. You will always remain just whatever you are currently, which has been determined by your parents, by your culture, by your extended family, by your government. An interesting point that the gentleman made was that you can't believe anything that the government tells you. And yet, we know that the majority of our history has been determined by the winning government. The winning government. Something as simple as this. As an African American, go and look at many different descriptions of the war on drugs. The government decided that they would use black men as a way of putting fear into America to get them to make marijuana and cocaine and heroin illegal. The government decided that. Heroin madness. That your women will become these sexual crazed being. They use the sexuality of women to to outlaw drugs in America. Go look at older American history. During the wars between the European colonists and the Native Americans, if the European colonists won, it was a battle. But if the Native Americans won, it was a massacre. And although you do not realize it all the time, as a child reading these history books, and every time it's the massacre of this, the massacre of that, anytime the natives won, and it's a battle anytime the colonists won, then you, in the recesses of your mind, start to correlate battles and victory and purity and greatness with the colonists, and evil and dread and things and savagery with the natives. This was done all over the world. This was done at any time, regardless of who it was. If one African nation destroyed the other African nation, then the ones who won wrote the story of them being the victors, them being the ones who were ordained by the gods, or God, or Anansi, that they were the ones who were supposed to win, because the gods had deemed it, or God had deemed it. When you read your holy books, according to the Quran, God deemed the Arab nation to conquer all of the Middle East, North Africa, and the Iberian Peninsula, and the Italian Peninsula. That God, Allah, deemed it. But if you read the Italian or the Spanish versions of that same era, then they were invaded by the hordes of Moors. They were invaded by the heathenistic Ottoman Empire. We use terms today like they were pagan because the governments were in control. Go read the victor. Read those who were the losers in this case. Understand both sides. When you do that, you develop what many would call an overstanding, so that you can really get into an understanding. Apply that to your life as to who you are and how you function. If you do that, yes, you will go through a struggle. You will struggle. You will have a hardship mentally and emotionally, because you will have to tear down some of the things that you have believed your entire life. You will have to tear down some of the things you have followed your entire life. You will have people who will disagree and argue with you. Those you love will separate themselves from you. But in the end, what you will receive, the peace, the blessing, the peace, I must say the peace once again, is well worth it. It's well worth it. Because regardless of what you do, there will be those who will not agree with you, and you cannot please everyone. So why try? And as they say, you came into this world alone, and you will leave this world alone. You will enter whatever the next phase of reality alone, on your own. What happens in that phase, we do not know exactly. But whatever it is, if you ascend, it will be a greater experience than this hell to which we dwell in now. And this world is a hell if you allow the negative portions of your brain to supersede the true ascended portions of your brain. If you allow the devil inside to exceed the divinity inside, then this world will be your hell. This world will be the prison of your inner demons, and you will exist in hell. You may have all the money, but you still can exist in misery and hell. You may be poor and still exist in misery and hell. You may have family and still exist in misery and hell. You may not have family and still exist in misery and hell. But you can also be rich and live in heaven. You may be poor and still live in heaven and earth. You may have a family and live in heaven and earth you may be alone and have heaven on earth. These are things that are all up to you based on your perception of life and how you got there and where you're going. So if you want to get to an end where you ascend, you must first go to the beginning. Understand that beginning and make your way in changing who you are, changing your mindset, changing the landscape of your inner being in order to get to an end of ascension. So y'all have a great day. Remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable.